And so, you want to know about solar. Well, you come to the right place. So, there are two main types of groups of solar systems, and that is on-grid systems and off-grid systems. The big difference is, well, one is relatively tied to the grid, which is whatever local electrical company or power line, whatever, that runs to your house. The second, there are pros and cons to both. The pros of being grid connected is you don't have to buy battery storage at all. You don't need it. You could just send your energy back to the grid and get energy from the grid when you need it. Now, this can both be a financial gain or just a complete loss depending on where you live. Some places have really high electrical costs, so when you have excess energy and you submit it back to the grid, if they have net metering, then you get a good portion of that money back. Maybe all of it, maybe half, maybe 80. It all depends on where you live. But there's the caveat of you not getting paid at all. But at the end of the day, if it saves you the bill of you having to pay for energy, if it saves you the bill of paying for energy, then it could be worth it for you. But that also poses a question about off-grid. Well, off-grid, you must have a battery energy storage system. Otherwise, well, you'll just be out of power once the sun goes down. Or you have to have a generator. I mean, wait, I take it back. You don't need a battery system, but you will need a way of generating power at all times of the day. Whether the sun is up, the sun is down, whether it's cloudy, raining, snowing, whatever. Solar can only provide so much power at certain times of day, depending on one, orientation of the solar panels, and the intensity of the sun at that specific day, at that specific time, is all also determined on based on location. It can be based off weather patterns and all that, along with seasons and just how the sun is feeling. I'm not going to get into the specifics here, but if you do want me to go into specifics of these, then by all means, comment, like, tell me you want it. I'll make it. I know these content. I'll try to put it into more friendlier English and make it more available to others. But that aside, what you really need to know is first just location. Where are you in the world? Northern Hemisphere, Southern Hemisphere. Okay, take that. The reason you need to know which hemisphere you're on is simply which face is best to face the solar panels. Now, for the Northern Hemisphere, you want to face the solar panels south. But on the Southern Hemisphere, you want to face the solar panels north. Those will be your two directions that give you the most power out of the whole day. Now, you could technically face them east and west because the sun rises in the east and sets in the west. But that means half the day, or half a solar day, which means from the time the sun comes up to the time the sun sets, which will depend on both hemisphere, where you are in the hemisphere, latitude, and all that, along with the seasons, cloud coverage, and all that. The tilt of the Earth. So, ignoring all those, and just going from east to west, no matter what, it's gonna have half on half. The sun's gonna reach half to the east and half to the west, because as it comes up, is going rise in the east, power those panels. But it hits high noon, it powers both east and west panels. And as it moves more towards night, dusk, whatever you want to call it, as the sun moves down, it then stops powering the east panels and then powers the west panels. And that is the same for the east. The west is not powered when the east is usually powered. And even if they do and are get powered based off just the angle they're at and that, the power is just significantly less. Another thing that also significantly decreases the amount of power your solar panels produce is shading. Depending on the orientation of the panel, along with how the panels are actually wired inside, can really detriment the load that shading have up there. Can really detriment the load that shading has on the panels. Shading is very bad for solar panels. In terms of, if, let's say, your panels are connected in a series, you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 panels. One of those panels has a line of shade right in the middle of the panel. This panel is arranged in a portrait. So portrait means like a picture, like Mona Lisa. And it's wired where the string of those shells in that panel go from top to bottom. Now, that one line of shade going down the whole panel means that entire panel will be running at a deficit. And when I mean deficit, I mean the current in that panel will drop significantly. It will not produce a lot of current. And because the system is in series, current stays the same. So if the current in that panel is down, that means your panels that are not in the shade, or not affected by the shade yet, will all be affected by that one panel because they're connected together. The way to prevent that is having them connected in parallel. So now, if they're connected in parallel, meaning instead of it going from one panel to one panel to one panel, it goes from panel 1 and panel 2 to your inverter. Now in that way, panel 1 will run low and not produce much power at all, but panel 2 won't be enough. But panel 2 will not be affected, which is good. That's what you want. But the problem is, then currents add. But the problem is currents add up. You can only go to so much current before you have to change the type of wires you're using, change certain equipment and all that. You don't want to go over a certain current threshold. And we'll be talking about current later when we talk about for American users, the NEC. If you're in other parts of the world, there are different standards of electrical codes and that you actually have to follow. The different, well, some of them are different than what's posted in the NEC. Some of them closely follow the NEC codes. It really depends, and I mean, some countries don't have codes at all. But in either case, you should just follow a safety code. Always take safety as a top priority. Like never. How do I say? Just always be safe. If you're in a country that doesn't have their own electrical codes, I would say follow a European country's codes, or even the NEC, as it's easily accessible. Either or, in both cases, you're better off with one of those systems than no system at all. We'll get to the codes later on. But back to the panels. So you want panels connected in series up to a certain point. Now, this may differ in European countries or Asian countries or whatnot, but for American countries, you're only allowed to have 600 volts which of electricity moving through in a wire in a series configuration. And this 600 is, well, technically, you're only allowed is not exactly true. Homes are only allowed to have up to 600. Commercial properties can have up to 1,000. That's why I say it's not technically, because commercial can have more power, or in this case, more voltage running through the line than a typical home. But you probably don't even But what exactly is this limit? Well, your normal home has two types of plugs: a 120 volt outlet and a 240 volt outlet. For simplicity, 120 volts is your normal outlet and everything. You use it for your hair dryers, your phone chargers, laptops, computers, all those appliances. 240 is usually only used for electric vehicles, washers, dryers, stoves, just those bigger appliances. That's the simplest way of describing it. So for homes, you're only allowed to have 600 volts running to the wire. Now, these wires will then get connected into an inverter, and the inverter will do its thing. If you guys want a talk about how inverters work and how all the equipment works together, I could also go over that. But for now, let's keep it simple and let's keep it with the panels. So first, like I said, is location. Whether you're north or south of location. You're either in the northern hemisphere or the southern hemisphere. If you're on the equator, well, lucky you. You get the sun all the time. You don't have to really worry too much. As for the angles of the panels, it is typical to angle it based off how your roof is slanted. Just place it right on the roof. That's a simple roof rack. You don't have to buy anything fancy. That's usually what most do. But for the best performance, it is typical to angle your panels with respect to your longitude. Now, you can find out your actual longitude based just with the Google search of your city. It'll tell you your closest longitude line. And that is roughly where you want to put your solar panel. You'd also just do this test using, well, an actual panel. Place it at an angle and calculate thing, but obviously it's gonna differ per day and per millisecond as the sun moves. There's also there's a free accessible website that is going to be very useful for calculating your solar, and that is PV Watts. You can just Google this. PV Watts. It's a government website, so it's by the NREL. Just make sure you have the correct one. I can also put a link in the description to it. So, like I said, one is location. Once you know your location, you have a good idea of some things. Second thing for PV is, now, are we gonna have it on or off grid system? And let me do it different. Let me rephrase it. Do we want battery storage or do we not want battery storage? Battery storage can cost much more extra, and you need, depending on the type of battery, maintenance or a good ventilated space. There are a few types of batteries out there. The most common are lead and lithium. The lead acid battery is what is used mostly in your cars, minus EV cars, those use lithium-ion batteries. Lithium-ion batteries usually find in all your mobile devices. And the difference between these batteries is a lot. But in simplicity, it's has to do with how they function. The lead acid battery is, as the name says, it uses an it uses an acidic solution connected with two prongs, and it transfers cathodes in and out. And without going into battery specifics here, that's how. And lead acid batteries are actually less lead acid batteries actually have less life than lithium-ion batteries. Lithium lasts longer and can hold a charge better than lead, but than the lead batteries, but the lead batteries are also way cheaper than the lithium. For lead batteries, you have to actually constantly maintain them and keep them at a reasonable temperature, or along with ventilation and all that for fumes. But lithium, well, you have to keep the temperature is also a problem, but there is no exact fumes that come with it, so you don't need a ventilation action. But lithium is also a kind of fire hazard. And for reference, if you ever have a lithium fire, you're screwed. We do not want lithium fires. First, if anything ever does catch on fire with a lithium battery, first, do not pour water. Water and electricity do not go together. Second, you could try to see if you have a electrical based fire extinguisher that you could purchase and use on them. But lithium is known to be very resilient by being put out. Lithium likes to, once it burns, it's gonna keep burning until it burns out. That's why lithium fires are very bad. Lithium is also one of those few things that actually can burn underwater. Yes, lithium burns underwater. You could Google a video of it. It's actually pretty fun to watch. Anyway, battery safety aside, lithium lasts longer and actually can sustain more charges over a longer period of time, but it's much more money up front. You have to think to yourself, if you want battery storage, then do you want to just take the high upfront cost now and make all that money back over the years, or go with the lesser cost and just actually pay more for your system over the years? Well, I say pay more, but your system will pay yourself back and just pay yourself longer. Either option is your personal decision. They have their pros, they have their cons. I'm not here to tell you, do this. This battery is the only one that works. This is the only great battery. Only this. That's not what I'm doing. I will give you options, and it's up to you to decide which option is best for you at this current point in time. There's a lot of battery calculations that I won't do here. If I do the video on the NEC calculations, I'll probably throw them there too. But in simplicity, battery storage is determined by how much power they can hold and how many times you could discharge or use that power before the battery dies out completely. Lithium-ion battery can be charged up and charged down more times than a lead acid battery. How much more is dependent on the battery, the makeup, and a lot of factors that some companies don't actually put out. lead acid batteries have a much better reputation with, and in terms of they're better. Lead acid battery manufacturers actually give you a lot of the information about the batteries, whereas a lot of lithium manufacturers don't even tell you how long the battery will last for. Every battery has a life. They all have life cycles. Lithium just has a higher life cycle than lead. There are a few other types of batteries out there, but I'm not going to battery specifics. It's up to you to decide what type of battery is best for your situation. The great thing about battery storage, and why you probably should go for it, is simply for the fact whether you're connected to the grid or not, it actually gives you sustainability. If you're connected to the, well, if you're not connected to the grid, well, you have to go with it anyway. But this is for the people who want to still be connected to the grid. The battery storage allows you to be connected to the grid, but when the grid goes down, you still have power. If you live in a place where the grid is not reliant at all, and the power goes out for hours on end, or every day, or maybe once a week, if you are suffering because of a power outage, and you're like, well, the food in my fridge is going to go rotten, and there are people who have to buy groceries twice in a whole week because simply for the fact power went out and everything in the fridge spoiled. If you're one of those, then I highly suggest looking into battery storage systems. It will save you a lot of money in the long run. Now 3, where will you place the solar panels? Now, where you place, as I said, mentioned location, is important. You want the solar panels facing south at an angle that is roughly close to your longitude. You could put them on the roof with normal roof mount racks. That is the typical norm and honestly the cheapest option. If your roof tilt is 1 facing south, and or 2 it is at a close angle with what your longitude. There is other options of getting angled roof mounts, and then there is ground mounted systems. Ground mounted systems are when you don't want them on your roof, you can't have them on the roof for any reason, and you need them on the ground, or you want them on the ground. Now, for ground mounted systems, you're going to be paying more to install a rigid metal pole, usually supported with concrete base, so the panels are structurally sound when wind comes, or in the likely event, someone crashes into your panels. You do not want them on the ground, like flat on the ground. You don't want them. You don't want them angled on the ground technically either. But you could also do that. You don't really want it, but you do you. Now, ground systems, as I said with the pole and that, usually cost more. If you're just placing on the ground at an angle, well, pretty cheap. The cheapest you're gonna get. With ground mounted systems, you also actually have the luxury of getting a tilted vertical 3-axis type of system, which in layman's terms moves the panels in accordance to the sun. These systems will just keep track of the sun and angle the panels to where the sun is at whatever time of the day it is, making sure it has perfect contact with the sun at all times. But those systems are relatively way too expensive for the average person. So now, you maybe decided where do you want to put the panels. This leads us into 4, which is going to be equipment. Now, there are many types of solar panels out there, along with different types of inverters, charge controllers for battery control, and wires and all that. Which, as for wiring, it's best to seek local electricians and solar companies on how to wire, or the wiring is also done by using the NEC calculations. Wiring aside, as for solar panels, you want solar panels that are relatively good in terms of watt per dollar, or watt per cent. So solar companies can probably get deals where they get 15 cents per watt. So when you Google solar panels, they're going to come in many wattages. Now, most PV companies buy panels in bulk, and because of bulk pricing, you could possibly get as low or even lower than 15 cents a watt hour, which for a 100-watt panel is $150. Now, as for the company that produces the panels, what type of brand they are, there's a lot of good brands out there that I will not go in this video. I trust you to research the brand if you want to support them or not. So the solar panels are either gonna perform what they say they are, or they're not gonna perform what they say they are. As for inverters, what you want, most companies and what they tell you is you don't need a one-to-one inverter, as the times that those panels will produce the peak value will not be 100% of the time, and most of the time it's running under. But if you want to get a one-to-one or a even higher inverter for maybe future installs, then you could. Nothing stops you. For inverter sizing, just look at your panels. How much power does it all go together in a string? They go by kilowatts usually. Charge controllers are a little different, as you're gonna need to know if they work with certain batteries, if they have enough inputs and outputs to connect to all the systems that you need them connected to. 5 is now your entire system. So to calculate what you need, you can either just see how much space that you have to put the panels. You can find the size for panels on the panels websites along with the spec sheets. Now, I recommend finding the spec sheet for that panel through the brand. So if it's a Canadian solar panel, to go to the website and look for the spec sheet. That way, you have the best and most accurate information. You can either base it off size in terms of length, width, the dimensions, or the power they produce. Now, an easy way to determine how much power you need, though, is just looking at your electrical bill. On your electrical bill, it should list what the cost is in terms of how much you're paying per kilowatt hour and how much kilowatt hours have you used. Just take how much kilowatts you have used in that month, week, or whatever, divide it by how many days over that section is, and that'll give you how much power you would use in one day. And to size the solar panels, all you do is calculate. Now, you use, let's say, 2 kilowatts of power a day, then you want 2 kilowatts of solar. And realistically, because the panels will probably not produce the peak power, you might want to go 3 kilowatts. That way, if it does produce more, then if you have net metering or don't have net metering, if you do or not, it goes back to the grid. If you have net metering, then that extra energy pays you. Now you get a paycheck. You get a paycheck for having solar. Isn't that great? The battery storage is slightly different because it's gonna depend on the type of discharge you want to do. You can either discharge batteries. Well, for lead batteries, you probably want to discharge no more than 80% of the battery, which means 20% of that battery is a no-touch zone. Whereas lithium, you could technically go up to 100, but I recommend just keep it at 90. That way it preserves a lot of the life. Now, if you do you cannot really go to 100 on lead acid because it severely kills the battery. It is a drop. I mean, okay, you can, but I don't recommend it. So, in summary, to determine the type of system you need to know your location. So, in summary, to design your perfect solar system, you want to know 1. The location. Where are you? What part of the globe? Northern, southern hemisphere? 2. Do you want an on-grid system or an off-grid system? On-grid systems, you have the leeway of the grid, but you are at mercy to the grid. Whereas off-grid, you can use the grid or you cannot use the grid. You don't have to suffer to the grid overlords. 3. Placement of the solar panels. Where will you place the solar panels? Are they going to be on the roof? Are they going to be on the ground? What side of the roof are you placing them on? And now, 4. What equipment do you need? You're gonna need panels. You're gonna need an inverter. If you want batteries, you're gonna need a charge controller and the batteries themselves. And last but not least, 5. The system as a whole. This is where we're going to take the dimensions of those panels, line it up with your roof dimensions, or we're gonna take your electrical bill and determine your energy requirement, how much power do you actually need, and size that to the panels and the battery themselves. And once you have all that, then you know how much power your system is gonna do, and if that actually will help you. As for the cost effectiveness of the system, the easiest calculation you could do is simply the entire cost of the system, and we're going to divide that by the amount of power the system produces, multiplied by your electrical cost. And that will give you how many years or fractions of years that it will take to pay off the entire system. Now, depending on where you live, this could go 2 years, 1 year, 2.6. It could go 5.7. I'm just throwing numbers out there. It all depends on where you live. But I hope this was educational and helpful to a lot of you. I'm sorry for the stuff of this video, and if it's not the greatest quality. This is my first time recording. I usually stream. Though, if you do have any questions, just leave them in the comments, or if you want, you can also come to my streams and that. Come to my streams, and I'll be happy to answer any of the questions that you have. And if I can, I will show you how live. But thank you all for coming, and have a great rest of your day. Bye bye, noot noot.